world is to facilitate cooperation on a global scale amongst groups and individuals dedicated to implementing solutions to the many challenges we face on the planet at this time.
Welcome to the 11 Days of Global Unity Summit 2023. My name is Jenna Larson, and I am coordinator of the Economic Justice Campaign for We the World, as well as filling many other roles for We the World. Today, I'm excited that we will be joined by Dr. Kurt Johnson, Dr. Rian Eisler, and Dr. Larry Clay, who will be talking about freedom. For the full 11-day summit schedule, you can register for free by going to we.net. There, you can participate in the after panel discussions and see replays of the recordings. There, you can also make a contribution to support us at We the World by going to we.net. Thank you for that. Now let's bring in my co-host, Rick Elphick. He is the founder of We the World at we.net and the co-creator of 11 Days of Global Unity. Welcome to the broadcast, Rick Elphick.
Wow, thank you, Jana. And thank you all so much for joining us for this inspiring discussion of freedom at our 11 Days of Global Unity Summit. The theme we are focusing on for this freedom panel is the democracy crisis in the USA and the future of the world. Many are concerned about the growth of political polarization and intolerance in the USA and beyond, the dominance of money and special interests in elections, and the weakening of policies and cultural norms that promote we consciousness and the common good. The consequences of these trends are being felt worldwide in our collective inability to properly address the climate crisis, the mass extinction of species, poverty, and war. This panel will examine what's behind these issues and explore ways to achieve a we-based society that can more effectively meet these challenges that humanity faces at this moment. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kurt Johnson. He is an author and activist and has worked in professional science and comparative religion for over 40 years. His books include Our Moment of Choice and The Coming Interspiritual Age. And he is host for the Convergence series on Voice America and publisher of the magazines Convergence, Light on Light, and Conscious Business. Kurt is also a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. Welcome to the broadcast, Dr. Kurt Johnson.
Yeah, Rick, thanks so much.
Sure. And Kurt, how are you thinking about this theme, the democracy crisis in the USA and the future of the world?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, and particularly to talk about something that might seem political, but actually it goes beyond that because it really represents a structural crisis. So probably also appropriate with the things that I'm going to say that I'm going first, and really then kind of set a scene for the commentaries that we want to have. Yeah, what's happening now is we are in a major structural crisis with regard to the stability and the future of our democracy. And it's really important that we can talk about those based on facts and without really any reference to personalities, because these are processes that have happened before in history And they really are issues that are deeper than just the current personalities that are playing out those roles. So what we have, oddly enough, is we have a front runner from one of the major political parties for the next presidential election, who's already tried to subvert and overturn a free election and prevent the peaceful transfer of power, and did that based on lies, many lies, which unfortunately are believed by between 30 to 35% of the electorate. Now, what makes it even more bizarre, and this only happened in the last couple of weeks, is that those that supported those causes on the ground on January 6th, with the violence that happened, be that the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, they've already been sentenced to prison terms of anywhere from 5 to 17 to 20 years. Yesterday, one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, 22 years. And yet the instigator of the entire thing still runs around completely free, running for president, able to do whatever he wants, and himself even indicted now 4 times in 4 different jurisdictions. And then making it even stranger, if we're just looking at the facts, yesterday the special counsel went to the judge saying that this person has already egregiously violated the terms of their bail and bond in the Georgia case. And in a normal situation, to stop that behavior, the person would be put in jail, so they could not continue to behave that way. But this won't happen in this case, not only because of status of this person, but also because of this cover that the person's running for office and is the front runner in one of the major parties. Creates even the more strange situation that the other candidates from that party, for the most part, choose to simply ignore all of those facts and try to pretend, because they want to curry the votes of that 30 to 35%, really pretend that none of this is really happening. So if we're just looking at the facts beyond personalities in the context of our Constitution, it's a bizarre situation, and one that represents an incredible naivete on the part of the body politic of the United States. Now, we have to remember that Hitler was elected and then solidified his power. Mussolini was elected and then solidified his power. Even Caesar was elected consul by the Senate of Rome and then solidified his power. And even among our allies in NATO, we've seen a similar rise to one-man rule, both with Turkey and with Hungary. So we have to recognize that beyond the personalities and the hype and the spin, there's a major structural crisis going on with regard to our democracy, and therefore the freedoms that are actually guaranteed by the Constitution of that democracy. And what this represents, and Rihanna is so important to be here in this context as well, it's one of the major regressions that she talks about, one of the major steps backward that happens from time to time in history, where suddenly you end up going backwards to values and ways of doing things which are pathological and had been avoided to a great degree previously. So we just have to understand that this is a crisis structurally, and then see it in that perspective historically. So thanks for letting me kind of lay that out as a fact base, and back to Rick and to the other commentators.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for giving us that foundation. Let's bring in Dr. Rian Eisler. Dr. Rian Eisler is a social systems scientist, cultural historian, futurist, and attorney whose research, writing, and speaking has transformed the lives of people worldwide. Her newest book, or her newest work, is Nurturing Our Humanity: How Domination and Partnership Shape Our Brains, Lives, and Future, co-authored with Douglas Fry. And Dr. Eisler is president of the Center for Partnership Systems, Welcome to the broadcast, Dr. Rian Eisler.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you also, Kurt.
This panel will examine what's behind the democracy crisis, as we heard from Kurt, and will explore pathways away from domination culture, where there are winners and losers, and towards partnership culture to achieve a we-based society. What are your thoughts about this, Rian, and anything else that Kurt Johnson said?
Well, again, thank you for inviting me, and thank you also, Rick, for being here and for doing this. And of course, thank you, Kurt, because you have really laid the foundations by so well describing what's going on. It is a global issue, and it is a global regression. And I want us to take a step backward and forget about the common categories, because if you look at this regression, it really transcends east-west, north-south, capitalism, socialism, right-left, all our conventional categories. And I think if we're going to move forward, we really need a new way, a new paradigm. And the partnership domination social scale offers this. Now, the regression is towards the domination end of that scale. What we have in the United States is really a very uneasy mix of partnership and domination. And what has happened is that this crisis, the tension between the domination system and the partnership system, as if you will, two underlying attractors in the language of nonlinear dynamics, is coming to a head in this time of rapid technological, economic, environmental, and social change. What we're seeing is something very disturbing. 30 to 35%, as Kurt said, of the US population really believe in a theocracy, in top-down rule, in the domination system, be it in families, or be it in our nation, or be it in the family of nations. Now, that is the domination system, and it's ultimately backed up by fear, by force, and it starts in families. And yet, they have a very integrated political and social and economic and environmental agenda, starting with families and gender as two cornerstones, whereas we who are trying to build a better world are still, as we have been taught from our domination heritage in our universities, in our schools, in our families, are marginalizing gender and family. Can't do that anymore. Why? Rick mentioned my latest work, Nurturing Our Humanity, which came out with Oxford University Press in 2019. It draws heavily from neuroscience, and in a nutshell, what it shows is that people who grow up in environments that orient towards the domination side of the scale, they go into denial. And you see it, you know, climate change denial, election result denial, COVID-19 denial. It starts with denial of the pain and the fear that is induced by those on top in their families, because these are top-down families, male-headed families. In other words, families that orient to the domination system. So we need both a short-term and a long-term agenda. The long-term agenda focusing on 4 cornerstones, which I'll go into if you will, later, family and childhood, because that's essential. Gender, it is a social and economic and environmental organizing principle. It isn't just a women's issue. Economics, what do we reward? And that is vital because we fail to reward anything coded feminine, right? Because of this skewed model of our species, and of course, story and language. As for short term, there are tons of things happening. It isn't that there isn't movement towards partnership. There is, but it is countered, as I said, not only by fierce and often violent resistance, but by this regression, this attempt to push us back. And I'll leave it at that. I just want to close with one thing. We were talking about freedom. Freedom is defined, like everything else, very differently, depending on the degree of orientation to either end of the partnership domination scale. In the domination end of that scale, freedom is freedom for those on top, be it in families, be it in nations, be it in the family of nations, to do what they want.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you, Rian. And before you go, I was wondering, because you mentioned it's not just an issue of women, the climate and war and all of these things. And for me, since women represent more than half of humanity, it has to do with all of these issues that you're saying, correct?
Well, first of all, when I talk of gender, I am not talking about women against men or men against women.
Okay.
I think we really need to understand that domination systems have rigid gender stereotypes, because how else are you going to rank one type of person over another type of person?
Right.
I mean, difference is equated with superiority or inferiority, dominating or being dominated, being served or serving, beginning with the two forms, the two basic forms of humanity. We know today there are many in between, of course, but not in the mindset of rigid domination systems. They're very fixed. I mean, this is why there's so much, fear, rage against anybody, trans, gay, etc. And gender fluidity is part of the movement towards the partnership side. It's just a whole new way of looking at things where it's full of aha moments, I think, for many people, because things that seem completely inexplicable suddenly fall into place once we leave behind these very fragmenting social categories that we have inherited, by the way, from times that oriented more to the domination side. It's time, as Einstein said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking, with the same consciousness that created them. It's time for a new paradigm.
Definitely. And I think you laid out that important foundation for what you're talking about with your book, The Chalice and the Blade. You kind of laid that for me, that was foundational in understanding the hierarchy, the original hierarchy that is now part of the whole domination culture, right?
Absolutely. And if you really understand that the principle behind that ranking is equating difference with superiority and inferiority, that's a template for racism, for anti-Semitism, for anti-gay, for everything that ails our world. These are not isolated phenomena. They all go with the deflection, really, of fear, of rage, of anger against the out group that is scapegoated, whether it's immigrants, whether it's a different race, whether it's Jews, it doesn't really matter, or whether it's women. I mean, think of the story of Eve. I mean, it's brilliant. Or Pandora, you know, you blame woman, the person from whom all of us, whose womb all of us, women, men, everybody in between comes, for nothing less than all of humanity's ills, for the fall. I mean, it's a brilliant, brilliant piece of dominator propaganda.
It sounds Shakespearean to me. But okay, thank you, Rian. That was just wonderful to get that foundation that we can all work from. So let's hear from Dr. Larry Clay. Dr. Larry Clay is an assistant professor of business at Marymount University College of Business Innovation, Leadership, and Technology. He is program administrator for humanities team, where he helped develop the Conscious Business Enterprise platform. And Dr. Clay is also a business coach, mentor, preparing business students for local technology-based firms in the TechSet Virginia program. Welcome to the broadcast, Dr. Larry Clay.
Well, thanks for having me, Rick.
Sure. And Larry, please react to anything said by Kurt or Rian, and please give your take on the democracy crisis that we face.
Sure. I would first say ditto to everything that Kurt and Rian said, but also add a few contextual words to that. When I think about this crisis that we're in, I too believe that this is something between two different institutional logics. Some may position this as the haves and the haves not. Some may position this as those with power, affluence, and resources, and those that are still trying to build and survive with what they have. And then you have those that have nothing, that are in the impoverished. But all people are simply looking for some type of opportunity when it's all said and done, whether it's an opportunity to build their own lives and families in some geographic location. It's about building themselves up as a person, spiritually, mentally, with skills and competencies. That's just part of human nature. And what I see that's occurring now is what I consider opportunity. And that's not just because I'm a business person, but opportunity now is greater than it's ever been before. Because one thing that we say in business, and that I constantly teach in all of my classes, is that business is really about finding opportunities and turning opportunities that come from problems that we have. Anytime that there's a problem, usually there's a business opportunity that's attached to it that can make a change. It's just those special entrepreneurs that take the tactful paths and trajectory to find out how can you intervene or how can you effectively change a certain situation. And so with that, I see several phenomena all happening all at once, which means that the situation that we're in now in crisis is what we call complex. And to further what that means, usually when it comes to complexity, humans, especially those of us that are technical experts in certain areas, social science experts, people that just know people, business, and things, we tend to approach complex things with simple solutions. And that's one of the limitations of being human is that we sometimes default into finding simple ways to try to make things work. But now we're in an age where we're understanding our consciousness a lot greater. Competencies, literacy across the globe has tremendously grown over the past 20, 30 years in developed nations and in some of our developing countries. And with that, that brings about tension from those that have been in power, who have probably always been in some level of power in a social setting, and now they feel the threat. Their human threat of power is being at risk, is being threatened, just because people are simply becoming smarter, becoming more aware, and they're becoming more knowledgeable of what they want and what they want to be. And so now we have a discourse between leadership and the people, which the whole idea of creating a governance system and creating government and power systems and hierarchy was that the intent was that the people at top will behave and act appropriately, and that should be pro-social, pro-human. But today we don't see that, or we see it less often in our leadership, where it's seeming as though it's more about the autonomy of power and to make sure they have the authority and power more than anything else, instead of making a more cohesive and harmonious world. And with that, this is where the tension lies. We're now at a place where people and the mindset is at that opportunity to be transformed. Transformation is actually happening as we speak. Unfortunately, we'll have those that are more positively oriented to transforming towards the better self, the better human, the higher self. But yet you have people that want to take a step back and somewhat retrogress us to keep the old system the way it is, the power structure that the way it is. And that type of behavior is the antithesis of democracy. And so we find ourselves here between those that somewhat have a certain level of dependency on our system, the governance system, economic system, the law enforcement system. And now we have the system actors themselves becoming angry because the dependency on the system is weakening. People, of course, want more autonomy. Wherever they work, wherever they live, they want more autonomy. Whether you're at the top of the food chain, at the hierarchy, or whether you're at the bottom, most people want autonomy and to be able to do what they want. But just like Dr. Esler said, it's more of a concerning problem when those that have power, that have influence, that have resources want to take it to that next level, to assume hierarchical power over everyone, where one person gets to dictate what everyone else in that society or in that social structure can do or have capabilities of learning and upward mobility. And that's problematic. And if nothing else, this is the opportunity for us as humans and us that are looking to achieve this higher self, looking to achieve more wealth, whether it's knowledge wealth or whether it is the financial wealth. As long as we do it in a less harmful way, caring about people and stakeholders, but also caring about our environment, what it's going to take is for more people to be more conscious. And what I mean by conscious is simply by being more attuned and aware to not only themselves, but to other people and to the greater environment, the natural environment as it is. And this, what we find, and it's research being done and being conducted as we speak, but there's also evidence that I can share with you that shows that leaders that tend to what we call adopt practices of interconnectedness, And these can be things such as prayer, if you're a Christian or a Muslim, or just simply walking in nature and just finding ways to meditate, yoga, finding ways to attune yourself to the natural state, and find time to quiet your mind, mostly quiet your analytical mind. What we've found so far in a small sample is that leaders, whether you're talking about leaders of a small business or a business leader in a multinational organization, those that tend to have some type of practice of interconnectedness, which amplifies their consciousness, tend to make better decisions and also tend to be better leaders in their organizations where people want to follow that type of leadership. This is what we do at Conscious Business Change Agents. In our program, we seek to train the next generation of conscious business change agents. And what is that? Conscious business is just business and capitalism with the improvement of people. What I mean by that is, in order to have what we call a conscious business or a conscious enterprise, it takes having a higher purpose beyond just profit maximization for your company. It also includes making sure that you cultivate your organization to a culture of stimulating and amplifying your own consciousness, and having the task of having each and every employee, no matter what they do in the organization, find ways of interconnecting with other humans, with nature, and to build their own identity of self. And along with that, you have to have conscious leadership, because it always starts at the top. The culture is defined what happens and how they see the top act and react. And if there is poor judgment, poor leadership at the top, you can safely assume, and it's evidence shown in the research that shows this, that it usually trickles down all the way to the management and down to the front line workers. That same mindset that you heard Kurt and Rayan speak about, the mindset that needs to be shifted into this new mindset of being more conscious, being conscious of self, the world, and everything around it. And I'll close with that right there. If there's anything else that's needed, it's for humanity to take the opportunity to find ways to be more interconnected than to be disconnected from other humans and disconnected from our natural being and natural state.
Yep. Thank you, Larry. And I have a question for you, because you were talking about conscious business and the next generation of business leaders. Can you imagine that the culture becoming normalized as partnership culture that Rian and everyone is thinking about, at least we're talking about it now. Could that partnership culture begin to influence the actions of people who are normally at the high step of the hierarchy now? You see what I mean? Because right now, they're thinking, I have to keep this power. But if the culture changes, then they would be out of step with a culture that values partnership over domination. I mean, maybe Rian, you want to say something about that, but I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Sure, and just to give a, which I just said, try not to do, give a simple answer to it. We see this, and it goes back to what I said. It's about the leadership, and it starts at the leadership first. Without having a conscious leader, you probably will never have a conscious organization, a conscious business. Leadership is, I would say, one of the one of the biggest key, if not the turnkey, for conscious business, because it starts there, just like in any other corporation that we think of today. And it's not just good leadership, so to speak, but it's the leadership that drives a shared vision that has a higher purpose. Now, that higher purpose can be definitely tied to that individual or to the team of people. For example, although he's somewhat controversial, Elon Musk, when you go back and look at his very first mission statement of what he was trying to achieve as a leader, and he simply said he wanted to be a part of transitioning first the US, but the globe into using automobiles with clean energy. That's simply what he wanted to do. That was his mission. That was his vision. That's what he wanted. And with that, that is, albeit it's controversial again, his leadership showed that he had a vision that other people could see, a higher purpose than just, I just want to make cars so I can make a lot of money. Now, that was probably underlying his true feeling, but because you have to have that higher purpose beyond making money and profit maximization from the get-go in building organizations and building better organizations. It takes that type of leadership for people to be attracted to that. And that influences them to want that same future vision as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
that's where the higher purpose ties into. So without the leadership and the higher purpose, it'll be very hard, no matter what the existing culture is, it'll be very hard to change.
right. And Rian, did you want to say
Yes, I
anything? And
certainly.
then we're going to kind of open it up for a call to action so that people can have a sense of what they can do to move things forward. But go ahead.
Well, first of
Rian.
all, I consider Elon Musk a very confused person. But that aside, and a very dangerous person at this point, because of his mania about control. And this brings me to a distinction that is not usually made about how power is used. You can use power over, or you can use power to, which is creative power. And he certainly has to some extent, although I know a man who worked with him, and he claims credit for things that he did not think of, okay? Let's just leave it at that. But also power with. But taking that even further down, there's a difference between what I call hierarchies of domination, because we need new language. And we're all very, very familiar. You better obey or else you'll get fired or you'll get killed or hurt or whatever, emotionally, physically, etc. Or hierarchies of actualization. And the term empowering is a very interesting term. It is part of the movement, isn't it, towards the partnership side of the way of thinking. But it is not enough. We have to understand something, that as long as our economic system rewards the wrong things, it is not going to really provide the impetus for change. And I wrote a book called The Real Wealth of Nations. And yes, it is a play with some hubris, I suppose, on Smith's The Wealth of Nations. But Smith's The Wealth of Nations came out of the 1700s. We're now in the 21st century, at very early industrial times. We're now in the 21st century post-industrial era, and it is time for a new operating system, for goodness sakes. Of course, we need markets, but the question is, how are these markets regulated? What are the norms what are the values, what is rewarded. And I absolutely agree with Dr. Clay that yes, we want leaders who pay attention to both their human and their natural environment. You mentioned caring. There isn't a word about caring for people in Smith or in Marx. For them, the work of caring for people in households was supposed to be done, and it was mostly in households at that time, was to be done for free by a woman in a male-controlled household. We need to understand where this came from. Even when Marx wrote, a woman could not sue for injuries negligently inflicted on her. Only her husband could for loss of her services. So these are antiquated operating systems. As for caring for nature, nothing. Nature was for both Smith and Marx just there to be exploited. So the subtitle of my book, The Real Wealth of Nations, is creating a caring economics. Caring. And the fact that more and more people, and I was happy to hear you mention caring, when that book first came out, and it's just as relevant today as it was then, in 2007, putting caring and economics in the same sentence was, oh my gosh, today people, in other words, we are changing, we are moving towards a caring economics of partnerism. And I want to just close by clarifying something. By partnership or partnerism, I don't just mean working together. People work together all the time, cartels, gangs, monopolies, in domination systems, invading armies, etc. It is much more than that. And yes, childhood and gender is huge. I mean, caring is associated with it's coded feminine, right? And it is really a part of the shift towards the partnership side to even talk about caring, even though a lot of people say, no, I don't mean anything feminine. We have to unpack the hidden system of gendered values to make it visible, because just to say that we should be nicer, we should be more this or that isn't enough. We have to understand what we have all internalized, whether we think ourselves as progressive or as religious or as secular or as anything. Anyway, lots to cover here.
Yeah, thank you. And Kurt, do you want to comment on anything that Rian or Larry mentioned?
Yeah,
and then we can.
I've been taking lots of notes.
Yeah, and then we can move into our call for action.
Yeah,
phase.
yeah. What I want to speak to, if I choose from my notes, is this higher purpose, which I'm so glad we centered on, because there are really two things now, historically and cosmically, that are driving higher purpose. I just want to call them higher purpose driver 1 and higher purpose driver 2, just so we understand them. So the first one is what happens just sociologically, is that when you get to a situation planet-wide, what you realize is no longer sustainable. Once you realize that all levels of what's going on, what the business as usual, living as usual, is not sustainable. What happens there then is this call to a higher purpose, to the win-win solutions that can address the fact that the entire way that you're living is not sustainable. In that context, win and lose solutions are not of high value. It's only win-win solutions. So at that level, we get driven toward that sense of higher purpose. The other driver, which many, many people don't know about, is now what evolutionary science understands about the process of evolution itself. And that is what's called multi-level selection or group selection. And that is the discovery in science that all of nature, including us, at the level of groups and groups of groups, always chooses for the good of the whole. Selfish decisions only happen within the smaller pools. Once you get into groups, then it becomes selection driving toward the good of the whole. So higher purpose is being driven by evolution itself. So not only do we have it happening sociologically, where we have to step up to higher purpose for all the reasons that Rian stated, all the reasons that Larry stated, but it's actually how nature itself is operating in order to push adaptation toward what will actually lead to surviving and thriving. So there are really those two drivers that are driving this sense globally. This is the good news. This is the glass half full instead of half empty of this sense of higher purpose, or the eyes of care and the identity of caring.
Can I just add something? You know, we need to know our neuroscience, and studies have shown that the so-called pleasure centers of our brains light up more when we share and care than when we win and dominate. And well, we know that people who are very giving, who give to others, they live longer. I mean, it is, we have been told false stories about nothing less than human nature, nothing less than women's and men's nature, like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty. I mean, she can't even wake up without this learned dependence and helplessness until she's kissed by a guy. Well, yeah, I mean, that was the mythology that kept the system going, just like Eve and Pandora, etc. But I just had to add that it is more congruent with human nature. Yes, of course, we're self-interested, but that's not the whole picture, because being self-interested means that we know that if you catch COVID, I'm in danger, etc.
Exactly. So with all of us now, can we have a call to action? What are you each calling for? How would you like people to take action? Let's start with Kurt, and then we'll just go around. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you don't have to look too far. You can look at this program and all the other programs during Peace Week, because what's happening now is we're moving globally now into this era of the network form of organization and the network form of impact. So it's going beyond top down or bottom up, but it's going to how nature works and evolution works, which is interlaced networks where the trickling isn't just up or down, the trickling is in all directions. And that's what we're seeing from civil society. If you look at all the organizations that are supporting 11 Days of Unity, that are supporting, peaceweek.org, all of the websites you can go to about Peace Week, you're just going to see hundreds and hundreds of organizations that are understanding that this is the time for civil society to step up in networks of networks from that eyes of caring and from that heart of caring, and really move things toward that world that could work for everybody. So that'd be my quick summary.
Thank you. And Rian?
Well, I agree with what Kurt said. We have difficulty because we're so fragmented into the environmental movement, the women's movement, the gay movement. I mean, they're all part of the movement towards partnership. But I really want us to focus on 4 cornerstones. One is childhood and family. Look at what the people who are really trying to push us back to more rigid domination systems do. They keep talking about family values. Of course, they don't value families. They value a certain kind of family, don't they? A top-down, rigidly male-dominated, highly punitive family, just as they value punitive social and economic policies. All right? I mean, it all goes together. The second is gender. We've got to understand, get rid of these gender stereotypes, understand that, yeah, there are differences between women and men, but a lot of these differences are heritage from more rigid domination times, and they have infiltrated our system of economic, environmental, social, and family values. So this hidden system of gendered values is fundamental. Economics, as I said, I wrote a whole book about it, calling for a new economics where the rules of the game, value and reward, caring for people, starting at birth, and caring for our natural life support systems. And you can find out more about this at centerforpartnership.org. Go to the new metrics that we're really pushing, the social wealth economic indicators, and of course story and language. We've gotten through a lot of that. We need to continue to do what we're doing, but we need to work more together. And this is what I really love about Kurt's work and the Hollow Movement. It is working together. It is an example that we can work together. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Rian. And Larry?
Yes, and Dr. Essler, I love the word caring and wholesome. And one thing I'd like to add to that is that if you haven't had a chance, one of my mentors, Dr. Chris Laszlo, created a book called Flourishing Enterprises, which consciously flourishing is somewhat one in the change and interchangeable. But when you think about what a flourishing enterprise is and what their organizing principle is, they generalize, it is wholesome and caring, because you're not just caring about yourself as a shareholder. You're not caring just about you and your employees, but you're caring about the whole business system where you are as it exists, meaning your customers, your suppliers, the people that work with you, the people that you have to pay back, your creditors. They're all relevant and they all should be thriving along with your organization, including your customers. So when we can create organizations that are flourishing and thriving, like Kurt said, that make thriving people, thriving individuals. And yes, this can happen the more times that we take intentional collective conference together and we use our collective intelligence along with the cosmic intelligence from above, and we can come up with these better solutions, these better ways of how we can organize and be flourishing and create what I call the seeds of any economy. And that's to stimulate entrepreneurship and to create these new business models and cultures in organizations around being more conscious. It's going to happen, not just because I'm optimistic, but it's going to happen because people are becoming more aware and people are looking for opportunity. I was one of those people that had no clue what I wanted to be in my life. All I did was chase money. That's all I did. And by the way, I did it very well until the carrot was gone. They pulled the carrot and I got fired and let go. And then I had to, when I felt that I was at the highest point in my life and didn't want for much, I had to go back, all the way back. Lost my house, job, wife left, everything. And I had to start all over. But what that did was a wake-up call. It was the universe telling me I wasn't on the right trajectory. And sometimes, whether you're that potential presidential candidate coming up and no one can tell you anything, but you can tell everyone else everything, and you're the leader and you have an authoritarian way of leading, it's going to take a wake-up call for that person. And sometimes it takes multiple wake-up calls before that catalyst of change can even be considered in that person's mind. Mm-hmm. So we can be hopeful that certain people get wake-up calls before they become more destructive to our social fabric, and or we can continue these conversations and grow within the people that we meet and the relationships that we build. And we have more conversations like this so we can be socially constructive and build a better, flourishing world for ourselves, because it is for us. So why can't we do it?
I totally agree. Thank you. Jana, do you have a call to action that you want to express? And then we will close.
Well, what can I say to add to what our amazing guests have said and offered. But for me, it's a matter of making a choice to be positive every day and in the midst of overwhelming problems, and do what you can. And that's how I live my life. And I think if everybody did that, there would be a lot of change.
Definitely. So this, for me, and probably all of us, this has been really a truly amazing discussion. Thank you all for being part of the 11 Days of Global Unity Summit. And it's all about we, right? So let's go from being a me society to a we society, right? That's why we launched we.net. So together, we can create a world that works for all. And Jenna?
Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Dr. Kurt Johnson, Dr. Rian Eisler, and Dr. Larry Clay. And thank you all for watching this and for being a part of the 11 Days of Global Unity. Go to we.net to get involved. And don't forget to stick around for the public discussion right after this panel. Much love to you all. Goodbye.